This bone has cut marks, the kind you might expect on an animal that was butchered for meat. But this was not an animal. It was human. The surface shows slicing. The bone was broken while it was still fresh. There are tooth marks. There are signs that the marrow inside was removed. Then the evidence becomes even harder to explain. In some places, human skulls were not only broken open, they were shaped into cups. So did ancient humans ever eat other humans? In some cases, the evidence suggests yes. But the more disturbing question is not simply whether it happened. It is this. What makes a human body get treated like food? Hunger? Violence? Ritual? Or something even deeper, the line between one of us and someone outside the group? For modern Americans, cannibalism is one of the strongest taboos imaginable. Even thinking about it can make the body react. Disgust, shock, a feeling that some deep human boundary has been crossed. The reason is obvious. A human body is not ordinary meat. It was once a face, a memory, a person who belonged to a family, a group, or a community. Even after death, that body still carries meaning. But the ancient world did not have the safety layers we live with today. No grocery stores, no hospitals, no police, no relief systems. The distance between hunger and death was much shorter. Under extreme pressure, a human body could carry two meanings at once. In someone's memory, it was still a person. Physically, it was also muscle, fat, bone marrow, and energy. The horror begins at that intersection. Why would this ever happen? The easiest answer is hunger. But hunger alone is not enough. At some sites, the traces may point to severe food stress. In other places, the evidence suggests violence between groups. Some cases raise questions about enemies, outsiders, or special treatment of the dead. Other remains leave open the possibility that ritual existed besides survival. So ancient cannibalism does not have one simple explanation. It may sit between starvation, warfare, ceremony, intimidation, and desperation. To understand that, we have to begin with the only witness still left: the bones. Bones cannot tell the whole story, but they can preserve clues. Cut marks show where flesh may have been removed. Fresh breaks suggest bones were opened for marrow. Tooth marks raise the possibility of chewing. Burning shows that remains were exposed to fire. One trace by itself is not enough to prove cannibalism. A human body could be cut for burial, cleaning, ritual preparation, or reasons we no longer understand. But when cut marks, chewing marks, broken bones, marrow extraction, and repeated processing appear together, the story becomes harder to dismiss. Gough's cave in England is one of the most striking examples. There, multiple human remains show clear-cut marks. Some bones carry signs of chewing. Long bones and ribs were broken open. Soft tissue appears to have been removed. The treatment looks unsettlingly similar to butchered animal bone. But the most haunting detail is not the cutting. It is the skulls. Some human skulls were shaped into cups or bowls. That changes the meaning of the evidence. If the only goal were calories, the skull could have been broken quickly. Shaping it into a cup took time, attention, intention. At Gough's cave, the remains do not only suggest eating to survive, they point towards something more complicated: consumption, processing, and possibly ritual. This is the part many people miss. Hunger can explain why meat mattered. It can also explain why bone marrow was valuable in a world without reliable food. But starvation does not explain every detail. It does not fully explain why skulls were carefully shaped. It does not explain why some human remains were treated differently from ordinary waste. Nor does it fully explain why the dead could be both consumed and turned into meaningful objects. In other words, hunger may explain the flesh. It does not explain the skull cups. That is why ancient cannibalism is not always a simple story of starvation. In some cases, it may have been survival. In another setting, violence. At times, ritual may have been the most important part. In other moments, the body of an enemy may have become a message. The meat is only part of the story. The meaning behind it may be darker. Gough's cave was not the only case. At Grandolina in Spain, ancient human bones also show cut marks and breakage patterns similar to processed animal remains. At Moula-Guercy in France, Neanderthal remains show stone tool marks and bone breaking that point in a similar direction. Different places, different periods, different kinds of humans. Yet the same possibility appears. Sometimes human bodies were processed like animal remains. That does not mean every ancient group practiced cannibalism. It does not turn early humans into thoughtless savages. The evidence shows one thing with disturbing clarity. That boundary was crossed at times. And when the boundary broke, the most important question became, what made it break? Part of the answer begins with survival pressure. Picture a small group in a terrible season. Animals vanish from familiar places. Plants are no longer enough to gather. One hunt fails. Then another. There is no food storage, no farm, no market, no one coming to help. Hunger spreads through the group like a shared threat. Children grow weak. Older members move more slowly. The people still strong enough to act must take greater risks. Every source of energy begins to matter. In that world, a dead body could become a brutal survival calculation. But food was not the only factor. Who that body belonged to may have mattered just as much. A member of the group might be mourned. A dead enemy could be treated differently. A stranger might fall into something more uncertain. Humans survive through circles. Inside the circle are people who receive care, sharing, and protection. Outside it are those who may be feared, suspected, or treated as threats. When someone is no longer seen as one of us, the meaning of the body can change. Inside the circle, a body may be grieved. Outside it, that same body could become a warning, a trophy, a ritual object, or a resource. So cannibalism is not only about hunger, it is also about belonging. This story has to be seen honestly. Ancient humans were not simply brutal savages. They cared for children, shared food, protected the injured, carried memories of danger across generations. Some communities treated the dead with meaning and care, but the same instinct that creates protection inside a group can also create violence toward outsiders. Inside the circle, that instinct becomes loyalty. Beyond it, the same force can become danger. A body could be mourned. It could also be processed, turned into a warning, made into a ritual object, or treated as a resource. That is what makes the evidence so unsettling. It does not prove ancient humans were only cruel. It shows that human behavior can become frighteningly flexible. Under one kind of pressure, people may protect the weak. Under another, the dead may be consumed. When circumstances become dark enough, the meaning of a body can change completely. The biggest mistake is assuming cannibalism always meant the same thing. It did not. Eating the dead during famine is one story. Consuming an enemy after violence is another. A skull used in ritual opens a different possibility altogether. Another mistake is thinking this proves ancient people were less human. The evidence may show something more complicated. Humans do not only eat, they remember, fear, punish, mourn, create symbols, draw lines between insiders and outsiders. An animal bone with cut marks tells a story about food. A human bone with cut marks tells a story about food, fear, identity, and meaning. So the better question is not, were ancient people savage? That is too easy. The deeper question is, what kind of world makes humans change the meaning of a body? Today, we do not live in that world. In ordinary modern life, hunger does not immediately turn a body into a resource. Law, hospitals, human rights, and moral systems try to protect every person, but the old instinct has not fully disappeared. Humans still think in circles: family, friends, community, people who feel like our own. Outside that circle are strangers, rivals, and threats. The frightening part is that the instinct to divide people into circles is still with us. Ancient cannibalism sits at the extreme edge of that division. It shows what may happen when hunger, violence, fear, and group identity collide. The horror is not only that humans may have eaten humans, it is that a person can be pushed outside the circle of protection, and once that happens, almost anything can become possible. Return to the bone. It cannot speak, but the marks remain. Cut marks, breaks, tooth marks, traces of a choice modern people can barely imagine. The cause may have been hunger, it may have been violence, ritual, revenge, or all of them mixed together in a moment when the human boundary broke. Ancient humans were not only gentle survivors, they were not only brutal savages, they were human, capable of care, fear, loyalty, Violence. Protection for those inside the circle. Danger toward those outside it. Did ancient humans ever eat each other? Sometimes yes. But the true shock is not only human meat. The real shock is the question behind it. What has to happen before one human stops seeing another human as human? Prehistory did not disappear. It still lives in the way we protect our own, fear outsiders, and draw invisible lines around who counts as one of us.